Good evening. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. Tonight, our guest, Dr. Kamau Koyaki. He is a general practitioner, but also an integrative practitioner. So
It's all right, brother. It's all right.
I'll get it together. I'll get it together. You guys will not believe. About 10 minutes ago, I had a severe headache, and Dr. Kokai came in here, and I told him about my headache, and I'm laughing right now because whatever he did, the headache is gone, and so I have to thank him for that. I'll take a short break, and when I return, present to you Dr. Kamau Kokai. We are back. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. The gentleman next to me is Dr. Kamau Kokai. Dr. Kokai, good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
And it is really timely, I would say, that you appear on this show
All right.
because of what you do. But let me just introduce Kamau Kokai, MD, received his medical doctorate from Yale Medical School and then completed his residency with board certification in family medicine. He was additionally certified in acupuncture, Chinese herbal medicine, applied kinesiology, and homeopathy. With 27 years of experience in integrating allopathic science with bioenergetic therapies and traditional healing systems, Dr. Kokai's broad knowledge base and depth of understanding provide him a multi-layered lens through which to evaluate and treat patients suffering in body, mind, and spirit. As an integrative medical physician, Dr. Kokai individualizes his protocols to the patient's needs, pulling on homeopathic therapeutics, Chinese medicine, allopathic medicine, kinesiology, and various mind-body disciplines. His toolbox includes clinical nutrition, detoxification, chelation, intravenous therapy, HCG weight loss therapy, craniosacral therapy, phytotherapy, chiropractic manipulation, and pranic healing for successful management and treatment of a wide variety of conditions encountered in daily medical practice. Dr. Kokai, if our audience only knows how much more there is to read, but we have a packed show tonight. How did you come to be involved in this work of weaving natural traditional medicine into conventional Western medicine? And why is this work for you?
Well, I guess this is an opportunity where I really get to give more than a short answer, right? Um, the reality is that when I was a reluctant medical student, when I say reluctant, I already had a sense of there's a certain profound limitation in terms of what I was learning, right? So much so that at one point I actually left medical school. Um, I left medical school initially during my first year because I said, this doesn't feel right, even though I, gone through all the pre-medical stuff. And then again, I left for a year because I said, I don't see myself just prescribing drugs and doing surgery for the rest of my life. Now, what's beneath that is the fact that um, when it comes to healing and health, I started with my own perceptions and intuition primarily. So even though I'm learning stuff, I never took my own intuitions and perception out of the equation. Meaning a lot of people, you go, oh, you're at Yale, you're at Harvard, or whatever, and you're supposed to sit there and just soak it up, right? So as I'm soaking stuff up, I'm realizing, well, they're missing this, they're missing that, and the framework doesn't allow me to actually speak up, address it, or figure out in a different way. So when I was in college, I was very much involved with martial arts. And at that time, I was a vegetarian, right? And I was actually a vegan for about 22 years, right? But in doing martial arts, I became aware of the concept of chi, not just as an intellectual thing, but something to actually feel. I broke boards. I had cinder blocks broken on me. I participated in all kind of activities. I watched one of my teachers with their finger like drill, like make an indentation in brick, right? So I saw this happen, and I said, there's something else going on here, other than what I'm learning, and in chemistry and these other classes, right? And then to add that, in going from a suburban background, middle class background, and going up to Cornell, which is a really politicized environment. I started a black student newspaper while I was there. Again, very much involved with the martial arts, but then also hearing the call of Africa, hearing a part of my past and my reality that I didn't know anything about, right? And that kind of blew me away, getting involved. And I'm glad it didn't happen until I was in college, because I saw a lot of people my age that were really brilliant, like in junior high and high school, that the reality of what it meant to be black here in this country was just too much for them. And they just end up doing crazy things, and they had problems. So the thing is, in college, it kind of set the stage. I was what was called a college scholar.
College
So
what?
I was a college scholar. That's like
Scholar.
right. So I was a member of their elite honor roll, the Quill and Dagger Society. What happened is that during my first year, I got an A+ in chemistry, and that brought me to folks' attention. And I had a Nobel Prize laureate as my advisor on the one hand, and a black psychologist as another advisor. So that I had two people speaking in my ear about the reality of medicine and what to do. And in fact, when I left school, I had a full scholarship to law school. I passed that up because I wanted to go more into the healing professions, and I didn't want to be limited by working in the United States, right? So when I got to medical school, I was listening for something a little bit different. And I appreciate it. It was a great, the study and everything at Yale. But during my third year, I passed my boards. I said, it's time to take a year off. I moved down to Harlem, 138th Street. I started hanging out at UCLA, which at the time was University on the corner of Lenox Avenue, the Tree of Life bookstore. I'm speaking to the herbalists, the astrologists. I lived across the street from the Rosicrucian Society, where the Osero Set Society was just getting started with somebody called Brother Ra at the time. I started taking classes on the use of oracles, astrology, herbal medicine. I watched homeopathy happen. I got a chance to work with a Dr. Ronald Davison at a place called the Shasha House on 39th Street in Manhattan. We used to cut wood in the morning to get ready, for patients coming in. I met an acupuncturist, Dr. William Wade, right, who's legendary, who still floats around giving treatments in the tri-state area. So I got a serious exposure during that year off, and I grounded myself in a kind of African wisdom system. I actually I graduated as a priest, in traditional African religion later on, but I got involved such that when I went back, I accepted that there was something here to learn from Western medicine, but I knew that Western medicine could never be a substitute for acupuncture. It could never be a substitute for homeopathy. It could never be a substitute for divination. It could never be a substitute for so many things that I saw and experienced. And even where Western medicine was supposed to be strong on a biochemical and structural level, I found that it was sorely deficient in so many areas, right? From nutrition. I mean, they weren't dealing with anything in nutrition back at that time. Structural stuff. I mean, they ready just to poo-poo the chiropractors. But why do people go to chiropractors? Well, some of them are doing excellent work.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'm curious, especially for young people who might be thinking of going into medical school right now or already in medical school. You were a college scholar. You left. You took a year off.
This is in medical school. I took a year off.
Medical
I
school,
went
right?
straight through my
You took a year off,
right?
but you went back.
Right.
With all that you've learned and all the wisdom that you
Right.
gained, you still had the presence of mind to go back. Why? Why did you go back? Why was that important?
Well, there's some practical reasons like student loans. I'm halfway through medical school. All I gotta do is complete the last 2 years, right? So not going back really wasn't an option, but it was like, how do I make this mine? How do I make this something that I will actually enjoy doing, as opposed to I'm just following the program? You know, they keep shifting. Like in my time, your parents wanted you to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. When I came home during my first year from medical school, and I said, I don't know if I'm going back, my parents had a fit. My father said, he said, God bless his soul, he said, you just radical out here. You're gonna be out here with a Tommy gun, trying to do stuff your own way, right? 'Cause he really saw me as being some kind of radical person, which I was in some respects. I was actually in the All African People's Revolutionary Party in Connecticut while I was in medical school. I was involved with going door to door, community education. So I was doing a lot of different things, right? But I had to figure out, like, all right, I'm going to be a doctor. Wow, you know, how do I make this fit for me? And when I left medical school to go down to live in New York, my plan had been to go to Cuba. Because in Cuba, I saw they were really educating people. They were really like, it was just a different kind of society. But getting involved with African culture in Harlem, I said, you know what? I'm going to stay here and just absorb this. So when it came time to go back, I felt like I had a whole community behind me that was sending me back, that wanted me to finish, that I was constantly connected to.
Talking about our community, and something piqued my interest just now, a few moments ago as you were talking. I want to go back. You sound to me with the wisdom of the ancestors of you have old wisdom, and I mean you must have been much younger then when you were soaking up all these knowledge, all this information, and so on. But I want to go into your early timeline to ask you a few questions, because you see, I believe each of my guests is a gem, and a gem has many facets. And oftentimes when we look at a gem or we look at someone, we only see a one or two of these facets, and we form an opinion. So I like to twist the gem a little bit. So by the end of the conversation, we have a more multi-dimensional perspective of that person. So I want to ask you, where were you born, and what was it like growing up at the age of 9, 14, and then who did you become at 24?
Wow. Cause for pause. 9-year-old, let me see, 5th grade, where was I at? 5th grade, I was living in Brooklyn. I was in Bed-Stuy, somewhere in Bed-Stuy, I don't know, Decatur, Howard Avenue. My mother was a teacher, so I credit my, believe it or not, I don't consider myself like uber smart or anything like that, but the whole nurturing thing that I received from my mother early on, her being a teacher and what she set me up with, and I was forced to take that seriously. My father was a military person. He was also city councilman here in New York for a while, but he retired as a major general. So we had a pretty structured household. I was good in school. I was good in school, but at the same time, I didn't know what was going on in the rest of the world. I was really oblivious. When Martin Luther King died, I said, well, Mommy, who was that? What was happening? Why are you crying? So I was already 12. So I was asleep to a lot of what was actually happening in the world. You know, I was a kid that would pick up an encyclopedia and start reading, and did a lot of like independent study on my own, just involved with sports. Got bussed in to a neighborhood up in Queens to go to school. Parents gave the phony address, you know, so we moved from Brooklyn to Queens to Long Island, right? And Long Island again had to be bussed away to another school in Westbury. Um, so the whole racial thing really stood out because that wasn't, we ran into some issues there, being bussed in, bussed out in high school. So I had no idea really what was going on, you know. And then the point that I wake up and I give thanks to someone who became a mentor and a friend, Professor James Turner at Cornell, right, who ran the Black Studies program there. And that's where I began to put the pieces together in my life, understanding my relationship to other black people, to the larger society, looking at the international piece, looking at historically what's happened in the world. And that can be pretty mind-blowing for any mind to actually have to deal with, right? But what was beautiful at Cornell is that there was a sense of community. We had the Black Dormitory Ujima. The paper I started was called Umoja Sasa. You know, I had to bargain with the administrative staff. They wanted me to put it as a little piece within the Daily Sun, which is the main newspaper. I said, no, I want my own, because y'all could just knock that out at any point, right? So I developed that kind of independence just in terms of a social enterprise.
I think this mic is so sensitive.
I should move it back a bit?
No, if you hit, what's your
I think that's just my,
Oh, is it?
that's me.
Oh, okay. All right.
Right. So, you know, I was, you know, and then being a college scholar, so, you know, I was, you know, and then being a college scholar, I really got a chance to set up my own curriculum. So I mixed in the Black Studies, I took the science courses that I needed to take, and I structured a program for myself. A lot of it was independent study. And I chose Yale over Harvard for two reasons. One, it was mainly independent study, and a friend of mine, who actually I share an office with, Dr. Donald Moore, was already there. And we kind of raised havoc a little bit when we were there, because we had the Student National Medical Association, and our politics were a little bit to the left. You know, and we kind of got in just as the whole affirmative action piece was closing down, and we were trying to keep it open and stuff, right? So that's a little bit of background. If that there's more room for questions, right?
I got it. Do you recall any special words of wisdom from your parents that helped to shape who you are today?
Special word of wisdom from my parents.
Something that still resonates with you whenever, whenever you think about your dad or your mom. I mean, we could always come back to that.
We can come back to
Yeah,
that, because
yeah.
there's nothing.
I'm curious about your early academic years, or like high school. Were you always did you always have a knack for sciences?
You're gonna laugh. I don't know if the word is knack, and I would say no. Obviously, I was good enough. Like, I had an A plus, I told you, in chemistry, but I just looked at that as a cooking class and trying to figure out in terms. You know what I'm saying,
Yes.
right? My knack has been listening to my own internal voice, right? In terms of doing stuff,
Wow.
particularly working with people, right?
Is this why you have this heightened awareness?
I don't know if I have a heightened awareness of what, but it is whatever you're perceiving. See, what happens in the healing professions is that, fine, you learn certain skills and, you learn stuff by rote, but there's a certain point where you have to go past that. It's almost like a person who's a master in martial arts. You learn all these different techniques and everything, but then when the rubber hits the road, it's going to be whatever comes up, right? And then you have to be prepared. So as I was in medical school and then during residency, I realized that when people were coming to me and I'm hearing their complaints, I'm like, these drugs aren't going to help these people. This is not going to work, right? I mean, they might be medicated. Yeah, your pressure is normal now, but that's not going to help them, right? So I had to really listen to myself in terms of what to do. So what does that mean? Well, clearly I sought out other avenues in terms of educating myself, right? So I began to develop a multi-modality mindset in terms of listening to people from different headspaces. I know this sounds a little out there and stuff, right? But I remember when I was invited to speak at my one of my children's at third grade class. They wanted to know, what do you do as a doctor, right? And I said, how am I going to talk about this? And I realized that anything that you can conceive of in terms of diagnostically or therapeutically fell into one of four categories. It was either biomechanical in some way, and biomechanical could cover everything from massage, chiropractic, surgery, cranial sacral therapy, osteopathic manipulation, whatever. But it was all on the gross form of tissue, right? Biochemical in that drugs, right? But more than that, food, the stuff that you eat every day. And unfortunately, in the last 20, 30 years, the chemicals that are inundated in our food and in our environment that become a part of us. And I always throw the statistic out, almost 1 out of every other male will be told they have cancer in their lifetime.
Repeat
And it's
that.
kind of,
What?
yeah, about 50% of men, you will be told at some point in your lifetime that you have cancer. And 1 out of 3 women. Right, now, you have to, that's a shock. And it's a shock because that information, people don't think about it that way. Then if we were then to design a medical system backwards from knowing that, right? Like, what are you going to, how would you then handle that? There would be a different kind of conversation about what we're doing and the type of therapy that we're giving, if that's actually the reality, right? There are too many vested interests tied up. Some of the same people that make the drugs make the pesticides and the other things. So we're never going to get there by a direct route. What were you asking me though? Because I got. So I'm talking about the biochemical end, right?
Mhm.
Then there's a bioenergetic piece. That's the big divide. That's where Western medicine stops. In fact, when you start talking about energy, doctors just glaze over, right? They start talking about placebo effect. They talk about mind, body stuff, but they kind of glaze over, right? And this is where acupuncture, Chinese medicine, check this out. Right now in New York and Long Island, there are about 10 medical schools. When I started studying Chinese medicine in about 1979, right, there were no acupuncturists around. We were studying in somebody's living room. Do you know that there's 6 schools of Chinese medicine in the area now
So what
that
happened?
offer degrees? What? Because the medicine deals with a larger reality than Western medicine does. So it's been a great second career for many people. And I've had students that were planning to go to medical school, but they sit in with me, and after a while they decide they want to do with Chinese medicine. Why? Because Chinese medicine is dealing up the energy matter food chain. And this is what I mean by that. Meaning that Western medicine is based on classical physics. It's based on everything is a material reality. That's Western culture, right? It's totally caught up in the material reality. In Chinese medicine, the understanding that was that the body isn't necessarily material, but it's crystallized energy. So hence the concept of qi. You got all kind of chi. You got food chi, liver chi, tai chi, original source chi, but it's all variations of what? Of life energy. Now, when you work with a model like that, you can work both with mind and body. Because if you talk about abnormalities in liver chi, you're both talking about the liver organ itself, but you're also talking about the emotions and energy associated with the liver. You're talking about anger. You're talking about irritability. You're talking about frustration and tension, or what people call stress. So a common diagnosis in Chinese medicine is constrained liver qi. Or, as many husbands have thanked me for, in dealing with their wives, either around menopause or because, the children, they were just losing it in terms of temper. They have ascending liver yang. So then you can use acupuncture points and Chinese herbs that help to balance that. So Chinese medicine deals with the concept of balance. Western medicine deals with the concept of homeostasis, but it's a very limited understanding in terms of how that's applied, right? And the drug therapy is imbalanced. That's why you'll see actors on TV smiling at you, talking about, yeah, if you take this drug and all of a sudden your liver fails or you die, you should go speak to your doctor, and see if it's right for you.
Yeah,
And after a while, people, they're saying, wait a second, this makes sense, right? So Chinese medicine gives you another way to deal with this. And this is what's really important, because we're talking about different cultural realities. And culture is what's behind any medical system. Any medical system is a cultural application. Western science is just a cultural application, no more or no less. And that's what my dealing with African culture taught me. I respect Western science within the context that it works and makes sense in. But Western science isn't going to explain what I did with you in terms of your headache. It's not going to explain many other things that practitioners in other cultures can do. It's limited. And folks, unfortunately, have limited themselves. Why? Because largely Africans in the diaspora have lost some of the fundamental elements of their own culture, right? And Africans at home have also, in the process of colonialism and neocolonialism, traditional healers were at the center of society. They had to destroy that. They had to attempt to destroy that, right? So in doing that, you have terms like, witch doctor. If they were talking about that reality here and dealing with Native Americans, they would talk about shamans, right? Two different kind of realities, right? So when I've traveled in Africa, spent time with traditional healers, interviewed folks, and it was funny because I was sent by United Methodist Church, by their head person at the time, of Dr. Randolph Nugent, who said, I know there's still healing going on in Africa like in the Old Testament. We want to find out why Africans will still go to their traditional healers and clinics and not frequent our hospitals and use our hospitals as much. That was my mission.
And what did you discover?
I discovered, I'm going to answer that in two ways. I
Yes.
give you an example. I was in Mozambique at one point. I was staying at a traditional healer's compound, right? And I was still in my interview mode, thinking about, let me just check out what's going on here. And these two people were coming to the compound to get help, and they looked to be of European descent. So I said, oh, wow, let me check out why they're coming here, right? So first of all, when I interviewed them, they identified themselves not of European descent. We're from Mozambique. This is where we are. This is the medicine that we use, right? If we want to find out about what's behind the illness, the relationship between things, what's going on in our life, we go to the traditional healers. If we need a biochemical, some kind of assessment of our blood or something, we'll go down to the hospital and do that. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So different cultural streams, people learn how to use different things. At the time I was traveling, traditional healers were really struggling just to be recognized by their own governments, which a lot of that has changed over the last 10 years because people, traditional healers are realizing, the governments are realizing the value. The World Health Organization, is bringing to folks' attention that, your traditional healers are a resource. But, whenever we see Africa, of course, it's still viewed, it's like, the latest thing with Ebola, folks have to go in, give assistance, and the whole bit.
Let me ask you. A question about your travels. You took some sojourns from medical school, from your practice, and you traveled China, the Caribbean, Africa, Europe. But I want to ask you about some different specific cultures. When you went to China, or you started learning and you studying acupuncture and different forms of Chinese medicine, what experience you had there that really stuck with you?
So, okay, two things. Most of my training in Chinese medicine was here in this country. My travels in China were really more to survey what was happening there in terms of Chinese medicine, and I was naive enough too to think that I was going to go over there and set up a business deal where I was going to have Chinese medicines coming directly to me. So that was an interesting experience. But the two things that have struck me about Chinese medicine, one, Western medicine has taken it upon itself to look at itself as the sum total of medical knowledge to this point.
Yes.
That, they are the arbiters of what is, valuable and what's really relevant to learn, right? So recently, in China, they have their own mathematical formulas now to decide the efficacy of their own medicines. See, because in Western medicine, they're usually looking for the drug, the single chemical ingredient. Chinese medicine, they look for formulas, right? So what they're doing is redefining within their own cultural context their standardization. So what they're doing is they're taking the power back. And I'm looking at it, people might say, oh yeah, that's good, Chinese medicine, they're figuring out how to standardize stuff, but they're doing it on their own terms. They're taking their power back. When I was a little kid, people said stuff like, you don't have a Chinaman's chance, right? Ain't nobody saying that now. They are like orchestrating their own reality. When I went back up to Yale to do some teaching, I visited the pharmacology department. There's all Asian folk up in there. And what I see up on the board, Chinese herbs, formulas. They're doing all the research. So not only are they hitting the formula in, it was funny, I was doing some research for a patient on hepatitis C, and I was just looking to see what's up. So it's all through the internet, new Chinese herbal formulas, great results with hepatitis C. But you couldn't find anywhere where it's saying what the herb is. You see what I'm saying? So folks are getting hip with respect to their own indigenous treasures. Now, on the other hand, when I was in Ghana, I had a chance to speak to two past presidents of, well, I don't know if the word is president, but the ministers of health, right? And they were not valuing, they had cut down like 50% of the woodland area. They weren't valuing, exactly what the botanical, what that reality meant. It was not being valued. They wanted to clear it to put some other kind of cash crops or whatever, as opposed to developing the your indigenous own cultural profile. That's the thing. You got to develop your own cultural profile, right? You can't copy somebody else's, right? And that's the thing. When I had a chance, because I got into acupuncture early, I had opportunities offered me like that would have moved me up the ladder in that field. I said, I don't want this, right? I said, it's a useful tool, but ultimately this is not my culture. This is not my reality. It's valuable, but and I appreciate it, but there's still other things that have to be done.
I'm talking about protecting cultural reality and resources. You just set up a Facebook page called Profiles in Global Healing, but I want to read an introduction
Okay.
that you have there. It says, this Facebook page has been set in motion to regain and reclaim the healing that we as human beings are capable of generating and receiving. Sorry, let me cut myself on there so I can say. Ancestral and divine wisdom flow through all of us, and Mother Earth still seeks to nourish us. We want to explore healing in all its dimensions and hear your stories and what you have witnessed. We want to share our stories for healing so that what seems impossible becomes routinely possible. For what is happening in one part of the world to be possible in another part. We want to raise the bar for what is considered healthcare, and we want you to envision and realize more opportunities for healing in your life. On another day, we will share with you how to publish your stories with us. We only ask that your story be authentic and uplifting. We look forward to reading your stories and commentaries. You are welcome to begin a dialogue around my first story. Kamau Koyaki, right?
Right.
Tell us about profiles and
I would
what is the motivation
I would
behind
love
that?
to. The motivation is, with all the fear around Ebola, with all the limitations that are in healthcare, clearly that both doctors are facing, patients' dissatisfaction with their drugs and medication, right? We have to, and just the reality, like for me, of living here, being born in Brooklyn and seeing certain neighborhoods just totally change, right? So I'm like, wait a second, this really isn't going to be home per se, at least not as it was in that cultural sense. So I am trying to, at this point, the real question is humanity's survival, right? So I've had to look at what's happening environmentally. I've had to look at, in terms of illness, or some people might feel biological warfare, however we want to look at it. I don't want to engage in a fear-based conversation. It's not about that. It's about elevating our vibration to such a point that we can create a planetary network of healing. And part of the planetary network of healing is first raise the awareness. When I started doing acupuncture, there was no awareness of what was possible for acupuncture. Nobody had heard it. For years, people asked me, does it work? Does it really work? And now it's like an acupuncture's on every block in certain neighborhoods, right? The concept of healing, one of the stories I didn't put in there, and I realized I'm going to tell this story, and people don't really have the background, either in terms of physics or their own experience, to understand why it would work. But I'm going to say it nevertheless, right? So part of our practice is energy healing. And energy healing is used by a lot of other cultures. Energy healing almost gets to what people would start talking about ritual and creating effect at a distance, right? So I literally had a condition called atrial fibrillation, where my heart was just beating crazy. This was years ago. And I figured out that I had a thyroid deficiency that was creating it. And I actually used laughter in one case to actually get out of it, because laughter is the energy of the heart in Chinese medicine. And I had a big belly laugh one time, and my heart went back into normal sinus rhythm. And I was fine for about 6 years until a few months ago. A few months ago, it would always happen after I would drink something cold, which was one of the tip-offs for thyroid, because thyroid warms the body, right? But on this particular occasion, it was about 11:30 at night, which is the weakest time of the heart energetically in Chinese medicine. And my chest felt like a jack-in-the-box, with the heart going all over the place. Now, one of the risks with atrial fibrillation is that if the blood settles the wrong way, you can throw a clot, and you can end up with a stroke. Because first I said, well, gee, maybe if I just rest it'll be fine. I said I might wake up and find I had a stroke, so I am not going to do that, right? I tried my laughter thing, that wasn't working, right? So what did I do? I got on the phone and called a colleague who was very adept in distance healing. It's a brother named Jeffrey Nobles, who's a pranic healer, and we worked together, right? So I said, Jeff, you gotta help me out here, right? So I sat down, hung the phone up, right, and I let him work on me, put myself in a state. Now, if you're used to doing this work, you know when you're being worked on.
Mm-hmm.
So in 15 minutes, I was back in the normal sinus rhythm, right? Called him up. He said, yeah, I felt a change. I said, yeah, I could feel it. Boom. That was done. In the story. Now, for some people, they're incredulous. But this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about global healing, when I'm talking about planetary connections. Because what we're talking about is mastery of technologies that are transportable across geographies. Now, I mean, you might have something going on in a little place that you're living that we may not be able to hook up here in the United States, but who's really satisfied with the therapies for hypertension, with the therapies for diabetes, right? Are we waiting for another drug company to go and exploit some indigenous population somewhere or whatever? So I want to create a global network. This is like part one.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the awareness. Let's share stories.
Yes.
And when I say share stories, I'm talking about having people that, what I call are healing ambassadors. People are in different parts of the world that begin to collect these stories so that we really develop a whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand what
Yes,
I'm saying?
I do.
So,
I do.
and one, to inspire people, for people to realize there's more to do than just to take pills. Because what's happened is people have lost a sense of what's possible in terms of their health care, what's possible in terms of feeling good. And it's understandable as our environment has become more polluted. Our soil is more deficient. Our foods have been altered so we can't even eat wheat. No one heard of gluten-free food 20, 30 years ago. Now it's like you gotta watch it.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen gluten contribute to rheumatoid arthritis, any number of autoimmune disease, gastrointestinal problems. We have so many problems that are related to biochemical toxicity and energetic toxicity around us that I want to create a vehicle to begin to sweep that away.
I applaud that. I really do. When I started this program, I was asked several times by different people, why don't you have some sensationalism? Why don't you go after that?
Right.
And I was determined, I still am, to prove or to demonstrate that you can have a media space that focuses on positivity. I wanted to create a space, and I think I have, where people can be their best selves. I believe that we can share stories that are positive. We can talk about our lives. We can share our stories. I mean, when I say positive with reason, because you might have had a negative experience.
Sure.
And you may have some challenges in life, and you might have fallen down sometimes and gotten up. That's all within the context of what I'm doing. And I'm not going to shift from that, because I think that positivity is important.
Right.
Right.
And the thing, the thing for me is that colleagues, right? One of the things when I went to Yale, I realized I'm not going to have many colleagues in this struggle, right? Because a lot of times as black folks, we're just happy to be there.
Yes.
Right? And we want to learn what, but that wasn't the case for me. I had a great memory at the time. So mastering the information wasn't the issue, but it was like I wanted to maintain and deepen my own roots so that I took the information and I'm trying to do something a little bit different with it, right? So I have this thing on YouTube called Kokai Academy,
Mhm.
just little vignettes where I kind of share like some other ways just to look at things or cases. When I did Global Medicine Review on WBAI for 9 years, programs weren't about me. It was just bringing in people from around the world,
Mhm.
right? So Chinese medicine is such a concrete example of its own cultural stream, its own way of looking and defining things. Ayurvedic medicine is coming right there.
Mhm.
But the African piece, when I was looking for something to do outside of my office, because I realized for what I'm trying to do, I need a larger venue or something, right? I sat down with folks from the Ford Foundation. I had some old friends there, and I said, well, what what's going to make sense here, right? What could I do? A radio show, whatever. And that's where I got the idea of going back to Africa to look at, well, what is the legacy, right? Because if you just look at mainstream media, is like you see folks just looking all impoverished. Even when I was in Africa talking to, um, you know, bishops that I had to deal with through the church, they were like, "We never heard of African medicine," So I'm like, wait a second, our people have a whole legacy that is just filled with accomplishments. I said, what's there? You know, and what's happened is the traditional African medicine piece has been disrupted and attacked on so many different ends that in some ways people had to run to Christianity to protect themselves from all the kind of negative practices and things that were going on.
You think that
Now,
was deliberate?
hmm? Well, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that are deliberate, but it's like sitting back and looking at what's been happening.
Mhm.
So the idea of this healing, because a lot of the healing that's done in traditional African society, for instance, if you were going to graduate from a real traditional school, you would have to demonstrate your psychic ability. You would have to demonstrate your ability to be in a trance, to hold, ancestral spirits or to hold different energies and forces. I've seen that, I've experienced that, so I know what that is, right? But it's a matter of we are so far removed in our everyday lives that our notions of Africa, we might think in terms of dance, music, dress, names. We're not thinking in terms of medicine, in terms of science, in terms of healing. We're not taking it there, right? And that's just one cultural stream. I was doing research around this whole topic. In the Philippines, their traditional healers, they've identified 1,390 medicinal plants that they've categorized and that they understand how to use, and that they're protecting their own legacy. That's just in the little Philippine Islands. Do you know how many medicinal plants are around the world? I mean,
Guyana has its own set.
exactly.
Mhm.
And and the thing is, what an interesting point when I was talking to people in Africa, and again, I go back to this conversation. I'm sitting with a group of bishops in Zimbabwe, and they're expressing their interest in traditional African medicine. They're saying, but we're interested in the herbs and what to do, but we're not interested in how all this stuff about how they found out which herb to use. Meaning that the African was not in a laboratory mixing things, dissecting things. That's a Western mind and mentality dissects things. That comes out of that culture of being in that kind of cold kind of climate. An African environment is just different in terms of how people come to know things. You talk to the plants,
Mhm.
right? You have dreams,
Mhm.
right? You intuit, you observe in a different way. That he's not going to let you do too much anyway.
Mhm.
So things were figured out and determined differently, and folks want to cut themselves off from that. In my office, because of the kind of history I'll take, I'm always amazed to hear how many people come in and they have different kind of psychic abilities or energies that they've had to cut themselves off from from fear because that's what their parents told them, all kind of things, you know. And I'm like, you know, it's really a shame, right? But there's no cultural mechanism really to help develop that.
Very
I'm
true.
going to talk on and on. I'm going to let you ask me some
No,
questions
no,
because
no,
you get
no.
me
I mean,
you get me on the topic.
you know, I will take a short break, and
Cool.
because there's so you have to come back. You know this, right?
Okay.
All right. Well, take a quick break.
Does that mean I can sit back and?
You could do whatever you want. We are back with Dr. Kokai. Dr. Kokai, what is the biggest misconception people have about integrative medicine?
Hmm. Let me you know, integrative medicine, it started off as holistic medicine,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then from a holistic, it was alternative medicine. And then it was complementary and alternative medicine. And now it's integrative medicine. I like the term integrative medicine because it implies that there are any number of modalities and paradigms that can be used, but they're integrated. Now, the integration is really up to the practitioner because it has to do with the practitioner's skills,
Mm-hmm.
right? So somebody can say they're a holistic doctor. What does that mean? You took a nutrition course. I mean, you do some manipulation. So integration is what the practitioner brings to that, and it at least leaves open. Like a doctor's visit should be an open-ended visit, as opposed to one where the doctor, oh yeah, you got chest pain, and you go through a series of questions, and they're writing a prescription for diagnostic tests and things like that. That's what Western medicine has been reduced to. That's not integrative. Integrative implies an open-ended process where a physician or practitioner has the freedom to begin to look at different ways, look at a problem from different angles, and integrate what they know about health and healing into a stratagem for diagnostic and therapy. Now, I just created my own definition of that, but
Mm-hmm.
that's how I see integrative
Mm-hmm.
medicine. Right.
Talking about physicians' relationship with patients, what are some questions you believe need to be asked of our physicians that many of us don't ask or don't know we need to ask?
Um, wow.
Is that a tough one?
It's a tough one because one, there's a basic answer, you know, like, okay, why are you prescribing this medicine? How long am I going to have to take it? Am I actually going to get better from this, or is this going to be for the rest of my life? Or are there any other therapies and things I can pursue
That
that
one
can
right
change
there.
the underlying, you know, problem that created this? Right. So, but a lot of times you may not get those questions out, or it just doesn't work. You already know it's like it's a closed encounter, right? It's a closed encounter.
Mm-hmm.
The problem most people have is to get in front of a practitioner that's going to have the time to actually do that. You have to pay out of pocket, and all of us, I can't afford to see myself, right? It's like all of us, we're paying out the nose to get decent health care, and we're trying to figure out how to play the angle. So we do the low premium, but if you get sick and in the hospital, your deductible is $4,000 or something crazy. If you pay the high premium, then you're stuck with a monthly bill, and you can't switch for the year. And there are no out-of-network practitioners that you can actually choose from. It's a racket. It's locked, right? That's why that's why this whole project
Mm-hmm.
in terms of creating an international reality. If you read the definition of traditional medicine by the World Health Organization, right, it speaks to the fact the sum total of the knowledge, skills, practices that flow out of the beliefs, the thinking, whether unexplicable or not, indigenous to cultures around the world used to maintain health and prevent disease, right? The U.S. is like totally lost. They out of that. I mean, they're not dealing with that. We're functioning in a closed system that's used to identify pathology, so that our level of health rankings in the world is poor. It's poor because we're, focusing on the end result. Even if they open more hospitals and clinics, it's not addressing. I mean, physical reality, the physical plane, if we can get metaphysical, right?
Yeah.
The physical plane is the end manifestation of a whole series of things that are happening, right? And that series of things, in terms of the kind of chaos that's happening at the mental, emotional level, is then mirrored in our physical environment in terms of the type of chemicals that have inundated our food, our practices with respect to the land and the soil. It's created a whole destructive atmosphere. And because Western culture is so juvenile, young, with respect to understanding about balance, understanding about mind and body. I mean, it's still quoting Freud, and I mean, it really, the opportunity to fix that, let alone dealing with people that are coming from different cultural streams. Our children at a different kind of energy vibration that you just can't handle in your classrooms, let alone in terms of how we experience our own health and morbidity. It's just not working. It's not working. And I remember at one point when I first started, I had my practice right in the heart of the community. I was in Bedford-Stuyvesant, right? And you know what? I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because I was basically going to be used as an emergency room, right? Because folks' needs were so pressing and immediate, and their lives were so strung from moment to moment in handling things, that it's not my nature to be able to practice that way, because I'd already was gearing to look at a different picture. So when I started practicing, I moved my practice from Gates Avenue to Park Avenue South. Just like that, and got exposed to a totally different reality in Manhattan that allowed me just to see what the wealthy, what people that have means were actually doing, how they thought, the types of modalities and therapies that were out there. Because an important distinction here is that in that definition of traditional medicine, so Western medicine is one product of Western culture, but Western culture is multifaceted. They've tried to throw homeopathy away. It's been picked up by the rest of the world, and now it's back here, right? You got chiropractic, cranial sacral therapy, applied kinesiology. Because of the socioeconomic status that Western privilege has provided folks within the world community, they've had a chance to dabble in Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, so that these things are available. But unless you're within a certain economic class, you really don't hear about it too much. I mean, acupuncture now has come down. You got community acupuncture. You got folks that have the skills and are of mind to offer it at a community level where it's really affordable. But or if you go to Chinatown, my God, they'll divide up a room with 20 spaces, and each space is filled with someone getting acupuncture, because that's part of the culture in terms of how it was given. But so I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, but you are. I mean, you started off with this global, the importance of creating this global.
Right. We are. Something has to change. So this, I'm trying to be an agent of change, but I want to step back because it's not necessarily my story. It's everybody else's story. It's what your grandmother did. It's what they did at home. when we talk about it, we look at different African traditions that have come, Akan, Yoruba. We see the different offsprings of that and how it's manifested differently, Bukumba, Condomble, Santeria, in other parts of the world. But these these cultural vibrations also carry the information about healing, about plants, not just in terms of their biochemical reality, but in terms of their bioenergetic reality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, folks need to learn how to clean their energetic space,
Mm.
you know, before they go out and at the end of the day. You know, there's so much that culture helps to prescribe
Mm-hmm.
that that we have lost and we need to pick back up.
What is one example of an energetic cleaning? I mean, for those who might are listening that might be very curious, what is one example of that?
Well, it goes by different names in different cultures, whether we're talking about Reiki, pranic healing, Qigong, or energetic passes, but the reality is always intention, you
Mm-hmm.
know, or in the church, the laying on of hands, or just prayer,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's intention, it's consciousness, right? And this is what African culture provided me, and what when I should have been studying for my boards and I was looking at books like The Dancing Wu Li Masters and The Tao of Physics, physics has turned Western reality upside down. Because physics is saying that the everyday biochemical reality that we function in is such a small, limited aspect of reality. And that the truth is that we could say all is mind, right? That there's one consciousness, there's one reality that underlies everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you understand that, then how do you want to organize your medicine, right? How do you want to organize your approach then to dealing with stuff, right? Knowing that a part of that infinite divine intelligence is also in you,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you're cut off from it. You're disconnected from it. Your emotions block you from realizing it. Your emotions block you from realizing your higher self. Your low vibration, your habits, what you eat, keep you in a whole cesspool of thinking, of fear-based thinking, of reacting to different situations. We see that going on the planet all the time. I just see even reaction within our own communities to Ebola. You know, we're looking at, you know, like the white man has done it again. He's fixed this virus and mutated, you know, this thing, and now it's going to get us. You know, I can't go there.
You can't.
I can't go there because there are always going to be people in your daily life, whether it's people that you meet, people on the world plane, governments, that they're going to stoop to whatever. You can't go there. We have to raise our vibration in such a way that the answers for what we need to do is going to come to us. Now, this is where, so I'm a man of spirit in that sense, that I believe that, not that I believe that some hand is going to swoop down and do stuff, but I believe if we keep our vibration, just hold on to the light and really try to dig deep within ourselves, we're going to find solutions both to our personal problems as well as to the problems of the world at large. And for people of African descent, a lot of that has to do with them really going and digging into their own cultural roots, their own cultural past.
That reminds me when we first started this conversation, this
Mm.
functioning at the high vibration and then becoming a magnet for the things that we seek or the things that we intend, and these things somehow appear. And I remember you talking about hanging out on Lenox Avenue at a certain
Oh,
corner.
UCLA.
UCLA.
Yeah.
And then there was these different people
Right.
with different knowledge and,
Right.
and skills
Right.
that were right within reach.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to say how do you explain that, but that seems to be attracting or finding yourself in a position where these things.
Well, put it this way. What I'm talking about is available to everybody,
Right.
right? And all of us utilize it in some way. We utilize our intuition, our sixth sense, our dreams, but what we don't really do in many instances is cultivate it. I took care of one of the wealthiest people. He was the wealthiest black man in the country at the time, and Reginald Lewis, right? And one of the things that he shared with me is that he astral projected. He astral projected into boardrooms and other things, right? So that it helped him build his financial empire. I mean, look, that's his story.
Right.
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 And all I'm saying is that I want people to really begin to share their stories, because once the genie is out the bag, there's something called morphogenic fields by the Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, actually laid out in scientific studies showing that if you teach a mouse how to run a maze here in the United States, right, and the mouse over in Europe that never got exposed to that maze will learn it that much quicker, right? That whole information will be amplified. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do understand.
So there are energetic planes where information travels. There are other energetic planes that we're never separate, on that level. And I'm saying we need to raise our vibration so that the answers that we need are right there in front of us when we need them.
I believe that is possible because I have had personal experience of that. I mean, now that you
I know
mention
you
it,
have. You better share.
I've had some personal, because I am both creative and technical. When I am troubled, I am most comfortable and most happy when I'm writing some software, I'm trying to figure out something complex. I have this determined personality that if something bothers me, I have to figure it out.
Right.
And my girlfriend would tell this to anybody: I will not go to bed. I would have to figure it out. And I have discovered, even with this whole setup here, this whole program, I have discovered solutions that I could not find anywhere in Google or anywhere. But it just happened like that.
Right.
And I said, no, this just can't be me. This came. And it came from somewhere, from some source.
Right.
So I've had those I mean, now that you mention it, I realize, wait a minute, this is possible. It does work.
So can you imagine then, as a doctor, as someone that's supposed to be taking care of people, there was a certain point where I had to really rely on that. Do you understand what I'm saying? I had to rely on that in a very profound way in order to figure out what's happening patient after patient, right? So after a while, that becomes like it's just there for you. Now, look, most people come into office, it's pretty simple and straightforward, but there are people that come in that it's really important to create the space where they can authentically be themselves and share what's going on. Because if they never do that, there's no real opportunity for healing to take place. Because most of the problem stems from other things that have happened. Now, I'm not necessarily saying I'm doing psychotherapy or anything in the office, but there are energetic ways to approach imbalances and things that happen with people. There are ways to, from energy medicine, using things like applied kinesiology to bring up things that have actually happened, to clear things, right? To look, at what's behind things, right? Even biochemically, there are ways to do that, and use of botanicals. Botanicals aren't really understood. You can understand them biochemically, you can understand them energetically in terms of a system like Chinese herbs. You can sleep with them and understand them that way. Or like my sister friend Tyoma, who goes and gives tours in Prospect Park. You just go and just sit with the plant, just stand with the plant, and just feel that energy coming on. There was one of the things I was really moved by. His brother is since deceased. When I was in South Africa, I had an opportunity to spend time with a brother. He used to divine with a rope. He would drop the rope, and how it would fall. He would start reading stuff. And at the time, I I had just given my motorcycle away. He didn't know I had a motorcycle. He said, if you had kept that motorcycle, you would have had a bad accident. Because he asked me. I said, oh, motorcycle, how'd you know that? Right? But more than that, when he would talk about plants, he says his father taught him that within that plant, it was the highest essence. It's the vibration that you're really looking for, that you really want to touch, right? And he would have patience. Then he would go out into the bush, sit, meditate, and see what actually called him, to do that kind of work. Now, some of us don't have the patience for that. We don't have any bush around, But, being in nature is a different experience. Being in nature versus like living in concrete. In terms of your senses, some of your senses get truncated here. So you got to figure out ways to keep yourself tuned up and open.
It's funny, plants, water does that for me. Since I was a child, I'm drawn to water.
Okay.
I could not pass by a stream or any body of water and not feel like going in. I almost drowned about 5 or 6, maybe 7 times, but I always get saved in the last sink. Somebody will
There's a whole bunch of African priests out there just nodding their heads and saying, yeah, because what will happen in different traditions, they will the energy matter vibration that constitutes your persona while you're here, it will resonate with different elements in nature. Some things will be inimical, and some things can be really helpful. In African tradition, people train to learn how to work different elements to actually cultivate them. So, and I hear this as I hear people talk. For me, it's taking care of people. Taking care of people is that's like my food. This whole social network thing that I'm starting, that I feel like that has to be done, and I'm really called to do that. But I would always want to be in somehow taking care of people, because I'm nourished by the spirit of people, when they're there and they're sharing this way and we actually connect.
It is interesting how doubt interrupts these messages, for the lack of a better term or better word. I'm sitting here just enthralled by what you're saying, because a lot of things are going on in my head, experiences I've had since childhood and so on and so forth, that I would just shrug aside or pushed aside.
Go get a reading, brother.
thinking that, wow, this scared me. I mean, the ability to be here and find myself in somebody. I may lose some of my audience, but find myself in somebody's home or one of my relatives, my sisters or brothers and so on, and thinking it's just my imagination. But I can just see someone who just shouted at something or had an argument or say something offensive or so on, and I would pick that up and then I would just push it aside. One thing I know I experience a lot is I love to, when I'm telling stories, or I love to give analogies, and I would use these real life analogies, and it happens too often to just be coincidence that whatever analogy I give the person, somehow or the other, it seems to be
right
what is actually happening in their lives. And I shut it down.
It's when you don't think about it.
Yes.
Right. You just let it happen. It's almost like it's not even you speaking. It's just in that moment, this is what you need to say.
You're talking about that. Let me just read. G said, very important and timely conversation. Patrick said, great conversation. What is interesting, one of the things that I practice a lot is obedience. Obedience to the flow. I had questions for you, lots of different structured questions, and you came here and we are talking, and I must have asked maybe 1 or 2 questions from the paper. Why? Because the flow to me is mightier than what I might have prepared.
Mm.
And it flowed naturally, and I believe that is the way it was supposed to flow.
Mm.
Um, and it's interesting because I feel that this is just the tip of the iceberg of our conversation. So I'm going to invite you to come back,
Okay.
right? And soon. So because this network you were talking about, I've just gotten a glimpse
Well,
of it.
we have event December 7th. If
Mhm.
people either go to my website, myhealthmattersnow.net, there's a
My health matters now.
mattersnow.net.
Hmm.
There's a little box on the homepage they can click off so they can get an invite,
Okay.
because we want to do it by invitation only. But that's like our inaugural event, because there are other aspects to this whole um, global healing network that we're going to unveil in terms of what it is that we're trying to do and that we
Mhm.
will do, right? So I invite people to share that. I invite people to comment on what the little story I put up about myself, because in the questions and comments, I'm going to get to share more about this, because as I told you, I'm very much in the moment and just talking and sharing, and I just have to wait for what comes through.
What are you most proud of, Dr. Kokai?
My children,
Your children.
right?
Looking back at your accomplishments, what would you tell your fifth? Or let's put it this way: if you could go back in time, what would you tell your 15-year-old self?
Wow. I've never done that. That's an interesting exercise.
If you could.
I would say, just get ready.
Get ready.
Get ready. When I was when I was in Mozambique, I remember I was sitting down. They had a dinner for me at the time,
Mhm.
and I was the only one not eating meat. They were looking at me like I was crazy, but they gave me a statuette. They gave me a carving, and it was a warrior with all kind of armaments and everything. I'm like, why are they giving me this? This is really nice. They said, well, get ready, because you know
Symbolic.
symbolic, because the reality here, living under this kind of like the constant, the day-to-day financial stress. Doctors are definitely not immune to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Trying to worry about your kids,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I love my children. That's like my deepest love,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm proud because I see the spark of genius in all of them,
Mm.
you know. And like any parent, I want that to have the opportunity to not be smothered.
Mm-hmm.
So, every parent is hurt by what they see what's happening with black youth around the country, you know. Um, so we live in really difficult times. And, you know, I'm glad to have the opportunity just to make this offering in terms of setting up this network for the little piece of healing and stuff that I can generate. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
really grateful to have that opportunity. So when I was 15, I didn't really have a clue at that point. I, you know, my it's so blurry. I can't 15. I can't remember what's that, ninth, 10th grade. That, I mean, I was a kid that was bussed into a high school where I remember just struggling with being black and stuff. I remember when my history teacher said, it was Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier frat, and he was laughing. He said, "Oh, guess who's going to win?" And he said the N word. He said the N is going to win, and he just thought it was just a big joke and stuff, right? And I didn't even know how to take stuff in. Like there was just so much going on. I just kind of I pulled in a bit,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's funny. My best friend, who was really brilliant, he started a chapter at our little high school in East Meadow of the Black Panther Party. He went on to Harvard, kind of had some psychical difficulties, let's say. Left school, went back, and end up going into engineering, helped design the stealth bomber and stuff like that. But went into totally, he said the system is too much. You know, it's just too much what's out here.
Wow.
I can't really deal with it in that way.
So
You know,
the system and
the system, it molds people. It'll try to take you down in any number of ways. There's so many things that people can trip up on, from how to deal with the opposite sex, from business stuff, just basic decorum. There's just so many things that are required to help a human being be successful these days. It's a lot of work.
what do you look forward to doing on the weekends?
Well, my weekend is usually Sunday, Monday, because
Mhm.
I tend to work on Saturday, right? Um, I'm a clan person, which means that I tend to, usually I hang out with my kids, my grown kids for a bit.
Mhm.
We hang out, we relax, we talk,
Mhm.
right? I love hanging out with my wife and my youngest child. We try to create some activity, a little rest, and then it's the projects.
There's a pr-
It's just always a project or a case, to work on.
if you were not doing what you're doing right now,
Oh, I don't know, man.
what
What I'd
would
be
you
doing?
try? What would you try? What
Well,
I'd like to try?
My son and I, we practice guitar.
Okay.
I love music.
Mhm.
I have a son who I feel is an up and coming musician. Um, I love the arts, man.
Yes.
I love people expressing themselves. When I was on radio, I had a chance to work with a really gifted poet who's since deceased. Her name's Fabian Miranda. Fabian would hold us spellbound. Like, she would do a poem every week to match the content of what we were covering in the shows. It was the Global Medicine Review. It was just amazing. So I'm really touched. I'm touched by stories.
Mhm.
I probably listen to a book on tape every week,
Mm.
right? Science fiction, but fiction.
Mhm.
I love stories, right? Because within the stories, you see the life, you see the thinking, you see the emotions, you see the seeds of illness,
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Patrick said, "This is very stimulating. Many thoughts are racing through my mind as well." Dr. Kokai, and this is a question I ask all my guests. We've come to that time of the evening. What makes you laugh out loud?
Wow. What makes me laugh out loud? A lot. I mean, a moment with a friend, just conversations, an aha moment, seeing my wife smile.
Mhm.
I mean, there are a lot of things. Give thanks.
I wanna. I think it's the ancestors talking. But a minute. Let's go somewhere. Joy, happiness, very rewarding, very transformative. Why do you believe that when someone is happy, like me, I have a weakness for smiles. I love to see people smile.
Right.
I love smiles. Why do you think that when we are happy and when we are joyous, that almost anything is possible? Healing.
So let me tell you one of the techniques that we've used sometime in practice, right? We will take somebody that has, let's say they're kind of withdrawn. A lot of times I recommend people to take an acting class or something so they can get out of their own story and stuff, get out of their own head. But a lot of times we'll have people assume different postures, like a hero posture, a warrior posture. And in the morning, just do different postures, to take on different personas, right? Smiling totally affects the whole nervous system. It releases neurotransmitters in the brain that help to stimulate you to do things. To not smile is literally to shut off a part of your brain. It's to not to connect with a part of your mind. Smiling is like turning the dial on the radio, so you tune into a different bandwidth, a different frequency. So just to exercise that, even if you don't feel like smiling, right? You smile, you take that on. So the thing, these are kind of like self-evident truths that we kind of know intuitively, but the key with healing is to try to present it in such a way that your client or patient is willing to take it on, because you said it in a way that they can appreciate it and they can do what it is that you've asked. If not, it's just like trying to tell somebody, well, go lose weight, go change your diet. If you don't figure out their motivations and their energy, like what's behind that, what's behind the anxiety, what's behind the fear, you have less of a chance of coming up with whatever. Could be a story, it could be an energetic technique, it could be like what I did with you, is just cleaning your aura, your feel, so that the energy would flow again and your headache would dissipate. It could be that simple.
Wow.
So
Dr. Kokai, I can sit here and I can talk with you for the rest of the night. And I know either your wife or my girlfriend would hurt one of us. But I want to thank you so much for coming. Right?
okay.
First, I want to thank you for clearing my headache. I wish my audience could have seen what you did and how fast it happened.
Wow.
Thank you for that. Maybe this headache was prepared for you, so that when you came,
I felt like I was being tested.
yes,
I said,
like when
brother
you came,
said,
it's
put
like,
me on the
okay,
spot.
We're gonna test him here
Right.
tonight. We're gonna test him. But thank you, and I wish you much success with this whole network that you're building. I think it is important. I've gotten a glimpse of it, and I sort of understand the importance of it and where this is going. So I will do whatever I can.
And thanks for your show, your professionalism, and giving me a chance to come back out in the public eye.
Ah, well, you'll be coming back again on
I will.
CWS. We have to have you.
All right.
And thank you so much.
Okay.
And good night.
Good night, audience.
And this is Selwyn Collins saying, fear not what fear whispers to you. Fear your obedience to it. Good night.
Like that.